Despite criticism and skepticism, the PlayStation Portal seems to be off to a good start, selling well and selling out in certain markets, sometimes in a matter of hours or at least in just a matter of the day that it was made available. I want to give a brief recap right here at the front of what I think, as well as push back on some of the things that have been said about this device. I think it's sort of framed in the wrong way from some consumer expectations. Like, it's clear that certain people are just not at all the target audience for this device, and that leads them to just sort of decry it as pointless or DOA or something that nobody is going to want. We are going to look at an article from Game Rant outlining the various places where this device has already sold out. This is sort of the second wave of launch. They launched it initially taking sort of direct orders only from their site, and then it just hit some retailers, and the reports were pouring in rather quickly just about how fast it became unavailable. The first thing I want to say is that this is an accessory, and I think that's lost on a lot of the people that point out just how seemingly to them unnecessary this device is. They say, well, I already have a controller and I can do this level of remote play right on my phone. Or they say, I already have a ROG Ally or a Steam Deck. I don't need something like this. They already have something that they feel is sort of satisfying that need for gaming on the go. But this is not meant to be seen as an all-in-one device. It's not even priced at the level of the all-in-one devices. This is an accessory to the PlayStation 5, and that just needs to be continually stated anytime somebody acts as if this thing is pointless or terrible or DOA. I don't think it's even considered like a high-priced item. It is $199. It's the same price as the DualSense Edge. So it's basically a controller with a screen in it. That's all it's designed to be. It's not designed to be a replacement of a PlayStation. It's not designed to even compete with something like a Steam Deck or an Asus ROG Ally. And I think that needs to be continually drawn out in the discussion. It's totally okay for you to look at this thing and say, I have no need for that. I would never use it. It doesn't seem at all to be anything that serves a purpose. But then there are folks like myself. I've had many people say, hey, the kids take over the TV. Like, there's a lot of households that have one central television. And when the kiddos take over for movie night, you can go out on the porch, go to the bedroom, prop your feet in the den and play on your PlayStation right there in your hand. And according to the initial tests of people that got their hand on this thing, when you are on the same Wi-Fi network, there is virtually no latency at all. The one guy said he was playing Returnal of all games. That is not a game where you could have any latency or delay. Those iframes, those intense fights, the bullet hell method of the game, you would not survive for very long. The other thing that I think needs to be clarified is how some of the marketing is making it seem as though you can only use this in your home. That is simply untrue. It states specifically on the frequently asked questions, you can use this on any Wi-Fi network. As long as the PlayStation 5 is in standby mode, you basically turn it on from afar and you play remotely. This is essentially low-level cloud gaming. Instead of remoting into a cloud server blade, you're just remoting into your PlayStation 5 at home. The reason I don't think they're highlighting that functionality of the PlayStation Portal is they want everybody to open this thing up in the middle of November and get on their home Wi-Fi and try it out. And they're going to say, wow, this is impressive. This works really well. That's the impressions that we're getting from the hands-on previews from the people that got to try it out. Then if you take it to your friend's house or you take it to Starbucks or somewhere where there's Wi-Fi available, if that Wi-Fi speed is inconsistent or not as good and you have a less than ideal experience, well, then they're trusting that you'll sort of diagnose what the problem is. They don't want the device to be blamed for something that's out of their control. They can't control the speed of Wi-Fi in the various places that you might decide to use this. So they're saying, listen, if they use it at home first, it's more likely that the consumer will be able to figure out what's wrong. Like, hey, this thing worked great at home, and now I'm using it at Starbucks or, my local cafe, and it isn't working all that well. Now, I'm going to test this out, so if you're curious how this works remote, I will try it in my own home, but it comes out right before I take my yearly Thanksgiving trip to Ohio. So I'll be in my brother's home. They've got good internet. They've got good Wi-Fi. I'll try it out. I'll have my PlayStation at home ready to go in standby mode, and we'll see what the latency is like. So I think all of those things need to be established because so much misconception, so much, I think, preemptive judgment of this device has happened. And let's just take a look at this article here from Game Rant. PlayStation Portal handheld already sold out in many places. Despite some initial skepticism about its niche nature, the PlayStation Portal handheld is already sold out in many places around the globe. Let's take a peek at what exactly happened. The PlayStation Portal is already sold out in many places around the world weeks ahead of its planned release. This promising start to its pre-order period indicates that the biggest drawback to PlayStation's first handheld is over a decade, its inability to operate as a standalone console might not stand in the way of it becoming a commercial success. That's kind of a long sentence that's got a lot jammed into it. What they're essentially saying is its biggest drawback is that it's not a standalone. That might not stand in the way of it being a commercial success. I'll tell you why. The price point. If you look at the standalone devices, they're, $500 and up for the most part. They're around that price point. This is $200. Now, I know somebody's going to say, well, but you need a PlayStation 5. Yes, it's being sold to people who own PlayStation 5s. That's why it's being purchased. They're not viewing this as a standalone device. They're viewing this as an accessory, as an add-on to their existing PlayStation 5. That's why I think a lot of people missed the mark on this. They immediately judged it against the backdrop of standalone devices. That's not what this is meant to be, and that's why it's not struggling to be a commercial success, because it is not being positioned in that way, and the price point's winsome. The average person's going to look at that and say, $199? If they bought a DualSense Edge controller for that much, it's not going to be hard for them to be convinced to buy this thing, especially with the attach rates that we saw for both the headphones and the DualSense Edge. Accessories sell very well within the PlayStation community, according to the webcast they did earlier this year. Continuing, it says, first unveiled in late May as Project Q, the PlayStation Portal finally received its official name and price tag 3 months later. But the gap between those milestones was nothing compared to the $199 handheld's overall development cycle, which came recently surfaced evidence pegged at starting no later than 2015. 8 years later, Sony opened pre-orders on the device on September the 29th. This being how long it took for them to develop this makes me very curious about the lack of cloud support. I actually think they're going to add cloud support later, because it already is, in essence, a cloud gaming device, because you're remoting into your PlayStation at home. That's almost not different at all than remoting into a server blade that emulates a PlayStation 5. Like, it's basically you server into a PlayStation 5. When you play on xCloud, that's what you're doing. You're remoting into an Xbox Series X, and they load you onto a Series S profile, and you're playing on that server blade. That's almost not different at all. It's using the same essential technology to do that. So I think that the Portal will potentially add cloud support later. I think in their mind, maybe get this thing out and make sure the firmware and make sure the up and the down tech being used is running smoothly before they turn on anything else. Now, I could be wrong. They could couch this as the Portal, as the accessory to your PlayStation 5, and then later launch a cloud device. Maybe it has some native power. Maybe it's meant to then be a replacement of the PlayStation 5. Like, hey, you don't need a PlayStation 5. You can just buy this and cloud play games. Within their strategy right now, I don't think they want to offer anything that could replace the purchase of a PS5. I think they want to enhance the existing customer's experience as well as continue to hit high demand. We know they're aiming for 25 million total sold this year. They're really trying to push that. They're trying to close the gap on the PlayStation 4. It seems they're going to be able to do that right before Jim Ryan retires. So I'm sure this is part of that. They don't want the Portal to serve or function as a replacement. At a $199, anybody's going to look at that and say, well, I'll just cloud game and I don't need a PlayStation 5. That would potentially harm demand. You'd have a lot of people buying the Portal instead of buying a PS5, and I think they would prefer it to be the other way around. Like, people already with the PlayStation 5 are buying the Portal. That's great. It's an accessory. That makes you more loyal to their brand. That's more sticky, right? The more you have, the more peripherals you have attached to your PS5, the more likely you're going to stay with them, because you're going to build out a library and experiences that you don't want to lose, whether you've got the PSVR 2 or the Portal or the headphones. It's kind of like what happens with Apple, right? Once you buy a bunch of Apple devices, you kind of don't want to leave their brand or their ecosystem. I think it's a smart way to get people to continue to sort of stay in your funnel. And we know this from the digital library commentary, even from Phil Spencer, about like that's really important in maintaining. And I think they're doing it also through hardware. Continuing here, it says, the PlayStation Portal subsequently took less than a day to sell out across all online retailers in Japan. It actually seemingly only took a couple of hours, according to what I saw. While it is a strong start to its pre-orders in Sony's home country, it might not come as a particular surprise. The handheld is also already listed out of stock in the US version of Amazon. Meanwhile, the stateside PlayStation Direct storefront has limited orders to one device per player, citing high demand. After initially opening advance orders in late September, Best Buy now lists PlayStation Portal as coming soon, while GameStop is only accepting early purchases from its Pro subscribers, having already bestowed the bestseller label upon the PS5 accessory. It also climbed to the top of the Amazon charts on accessories. I have a screenshot on my phone of that. It's all the way at the top, above the controllers, above everything. It's the number one spot. It really, really surged in demand virtually everywhere it showed up. Now, many people are pushing back and saying, well, we don't know how many they made. Well, we know that they did enough market research to say this is worth making. And if you're going to make an accessory, you're going to make it in a quantity of high enough to make good money on, to make good margins on. So whatever their first wave of this device was, it has seemingly been gobbled up very quickly. That's actually very, very good with respect to having market power, because now they can say, okay, this is how fast it's sold. That informs second wave. That informs demand. That informs production. Does there need to be a ramp up in production, a ramp down, or keep production at level? They now have all that information. We don't, but they do. And I think that's a piece of strength that they're going to be able to utilize for this thing. And that's why this video is basically an I told you so. It's like I told people that this thing would be in high demand. I said it would be hard to get. I said it would sell very fast in Japan. I had people doubting that. They're like, no, I don't think so. You know, PlayStation 5 attach rate isn't great in Japan. I said, yes, but this could be a catalyst into the gaming on the go culture in Japan. Like, this could be the way to say, hey, you're not really gaming that much at home. You're gaming more on the go. If you look at the attach rate of the Nintendo Switch, 30 million Switches have been sold in Japan. There's 125 million people there. That's like 1 in every 4th person has a Nintendo Switch. That's crazy, right? Well, this could serve as a great catalyst to get more Japanese consumers to say, man, I really want to get a PlayStation 5 because I can actually play it on Wi-Fi when I'm not at home. And with a culture that has more available Wi-Fi, and in some cities and in some locations, it's on trams, it's on trains, it's in cafes, and it's much faster than maybe what we're accustomed to. I think that's more difficult here in the West for us to think of that sort of gaming on the go culture. We think of gaming on the go as more of like a mobile, or maybe the Nintendo Switch or a ROG Ally or something where you need native power. And with the new iPhones, I think that is going to become more common, where you have a native device that's strong enough to play more modern games. But I also think having something like this, that you don't have to worry about installing anything, and it's more of a cloud device, I think that's also going to grow in popularity. Continuing to read here, it says, Sony never revealed the maximum pre-order volume that it intends to fulfill ahead of the Gizmo's debut, making it impossible to accurately assess just how well the PlayStation Portal is already selling during this pre-release period. Its closest comparison point is the PSVR 2, whose early demand never exceeded its planned supply in the run-up to its February 2023 launch. Nevertheless, the VR accessory for the PS5 still sold 600,000 units in its first 3 months on the market, and Sony confirming this much back in May. The other thing to consider here about the PSVR 2 that really gets lost in the discussion is that they only sold it through their direct. It was not sold through retailers. That's a difference here with the Portal, is it was sold direct only, and then very shortly thereafter, it's now available in retailers. And the PSVR 2 is now rolling out into retailers. The PSVR 2 launched in the slowest quarter of the year, only on PlayStation Direct, and it's already set to surpass the PSVR 1. Much of the sort of downplaying of how well the PSVR 2 was doing was very misleading once we actually saw the numbers and you considered the context in which it landed. I just don't think it was very, represented very well by the people that were trying to run with those headlines. The PS Portal is likely doing even better. Number one, price point. A lot easier to buy a $199 device. And secondly, it's not just being held in the direct-only store, and it's also launching at a time of the year where people are a little bit more apt to spend money. First quarter, things always sort of slow down. Even ad spending slows down because commercially, marketing knows that people spend less money during that quarter, and it hadn't hit retailers at that point. The Portal came to retailers much faster. Continuing here, it says, based on that limited context, and assuming the PlayStation Portal didn't have a smaller pre-order volume than the PSVR 2, it's possible that the upcoming handheld hits 1 million sales not long after its release. Its potential customer pool is approximately 40 million strong, which is how many PlayStation 5 consoles Sony sold as of July. And they're aiming to have 25 million total just this year. So they've got high aspirations for PS5 quantity. It remains to be seen whether any of the retailers who are no longer accepting advance orders for the handheld open another wave of pre-orders ahead of its mid-November launch. That notwithstanding, this early market performance indicates that the PlayStation Portal's promise of a portable PS5 screen with long battery life has already enticed many gamers to open their wallets, even if the device itself doesn't rival standalone handhelds like the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck. And again, that comparison is unnecessary. It's not meant to be a native device. It's meant to be an accessory to the PlayStation 5. We should be judging this as a sort of controller screen hybrid. We shouldn't be judging this against standalone devices. And something that I've always said when this comes up is that I think consumers need to remember that there are products that don't interest them at all. There are products out there that I would never buy. I would never even be enticed to get them in the least bit. And they'll sell millions of, pieces of these devices or copies. Same thing with games, right? There are games I would never touch, and they're super popular. Splatoon's a great example. That thing is a massive hit on the Nintendo Switch. I've played it for 5 minutes, I think, in my entire life. That doesn't mean that there isn't demand for Splatoon. So for those of you that have a standalone device, or you already do sort of remote play gaming on your phone with a controller that you bought, that's great. You're not the target audience. It's clear the target audience is responding very quickly, and likely the next wave will be more proof of that, because there'll be clearly more waves and restocks. So I told you the PlayStation Portal was going to be a device that would sell well and get a good attach rate, and it's already off to a great start selling out in the various retailers. I would love to know what you think. Leave a comment below, or stick around for the members-only debrief. My uploads typically roll over into a debrief for members, so you can click join, and for $5 you can get into that extra additive content. If you don't do memberships on YouTube, that's totally fine. Hitting subscribe and the bell button and the like button supports as well, and that way I can see you in the next video.